Xbox controllers can start to get a little bit expensive. Just check out this video of some of our favorites. For those on a budget though, PowerA has been a consistent source of more affordable options that go beyond the stock controller. Its latest, the PowerA Fusion Pro 3, is packed with features for the $80 price tag. But $80 for a wired controller, that's teetering on the edge of what budget controllers cost. So how does it perform compared to some of the other controllers out there on the market? Well, let's dive in and check it out. Hey everybody, I'm Jordan with 95 Toys. Make sure you are subscribed for any future upcoming controller reviews. But today we are taking a look at the PowerA Fusion Pro 3. Just as a quick overview, PowerA has quite a few different controllers available on their website, and the Fusion Pro controllers offer some of the most customizability. So you have three-way adjustable triggers up here, you have 4 mappable buttons on the back, and you also have a removable faceplate that allows you to swap out the thumbsticks. There is one extra set of thumbsticks included in here. There's a shorter, more stock version and a taller version. One thing to note here, this is not the stock faceplate. This is the Midnight Shadow Special Edition, which I can't actually find listed anywhere. This is what they sent me to review, so I don't know if this will be the same $80 price point or if it's just a different faceplate or what exactly that is. I do know that they have this faceplate for the Fusion Pro 2, their older model, so maybe we'll see one on the Fusion Pro 3 here pretty soon, but I do like it. It gives kind of like that Damascus steel kind of look to it, where it's just kind of like a textured black and matte black design. So that's why it might look a little bit different than what you see online. So first and foremost, let's dive in and get right into the overall design of this controller. Unlike Razer and Thrustmaster, PowerA didn't stray too far from the stock controller when it comes to the overall design. As you can see here, the shape is very reminiscent of the stock controller, so it feels very familiar when you actually hold it in your hand. It is a wired controller, so there's no need for batteries, so it is a little bit lighter. On the face is all the controls you would expect to see. There's also a little volume control down here that you can push left or right to turn the volume up or down, and if you have a headset plugged into it and you press it in, that light will illuminate red to let you know that that microphone is muted. Moving on to comfort, because of that very familiar design and shape, this controller feels very comfortable, very familiar in my hand. I had no issues using it for, longer sessions. On the back of the controller is a little bit of a textured finish, which does help with, when your hands start to get a little bit sweaty. And that was something that we were missing on the Thrustmaster eSwap XR controller with their racing module. All right, now let's move on to some of these enhancements. First off, let's talk about the back buttons. Now, if you've seen the Fusion Pro controllers from PowerA before, these look quite a bit different. On the last 2 generations, there was a removable pack here in the middle that had the kind of paddle design like what you would see on the Elite series from Xbox. These buttons, though, are built into the back of the controller and they are non-removable. That being said, at least for me and for how I grip a controller, this is one of the best implementations of back buttons that I've ever felt on a controller. I do have to modify my grip ever so slightly. Here would kind of be my most comfortable grip. And then when I have my fingers on the buttons, I have to move my fingers up a little bit. So I do have to modify my grip a little bit, but the thing is, all 4 of my fingers are sitting right on those buttons there. Very easy to actuate, and I think they nailed the placement here. To me, the benefit of having these back buttons can really only be realized when you can actually rest your fingers on those 4 buttons and have them, just instantly able to be pressed and actuated. That's the benefit over, face buttons up here. And that is why I found the placement of the back buttons on like the Razer Wolverine V2 Chroma to be pretty abysmal, at least for me. You really had to move your hand quite a bit to reach any of those back buttons, which kind of takes away the functionality of it, in my opinion. So if you're really looking for back buttons, I really think PowerA has nailed the placement here. Mapping the back buttons is very simple. There's a program button right here, and all you need to do is hold that until the button or the little LED light on the front starts to flash, and then you press the button that you want to map. I'll push B, it starts mapping quickly, and then you push the button that you want to map it to, and then the light will stop flashing. So as easy as that, very simple to map the buttons back here. The triggers offer 3 different levels of movement. The full pull is maybe like a millimeter or 2 shorter than like a stock Xbox controller. And then the middle one shortens that by probably about half. And then the shortest one takes it down to maybe a quarter of the full pull. Now that does definitely shorten it up if you're playing an FPS game and want a shorter trigger pull, but if you want the shortest possible, then check out the Scuff Instinct Pro, as that seems like an actual hair trigger. One other nice feature on here is that there are rumble motors in the triggers as well, just like the stock controller. And that's really nice if you are playing a game like Forza Horizon 5. You'll feel when your tires start to break loose under throttle, in the right trigger, and you'll also feel when they start to lock up with the left trigger, which is a really nice addition there. On the Razer Wolverine V2 Chroma and also the Thrustmaster eSwap, they went a different direction with the face buttons and actually had them kind of like a little clicky tactile button. On here though, on the Fusion Pro 3, just like the stock Xbox controllers, it's a little bit mushy, a little bit more plasticky, doesn't have as nice of a feedback as those other two controllers. I do think it's a little bit more muted, a little bit quieter than the stock controller. Here is the Fusion Pro 3 and the stock. Fusion, stock. So you can hear it's a little bit quieter, doesn't have quite, kind of the sharper noise as the stock controller, but still the same kind of mushy kind of feel. But that being said, I had no issues with this controller, unlike the Elite Core 2 from Xbox. You can check out that video up here if you want to hear about that. All right, now let's talk about the thumbsticks, which are performing very well. They snap back to the lowest number that actually shows up on the online gamepad tester, which is really impressive. The Thrustmaster controller almost did this, but in maybe one axis, it still showed a little bit of input registered. The stock controller shows quite a bit of it. And so this is a good indicator of there not being any stick drift, although I've only had it for a couple weeks, so it's kind of hard to gauge how long it's going to last. I will update if it has some really big issues, but that is a very good indicator right out of the box. And here we are recording on the gamepad tester so you can see how that performs. Here we'll play with the left thumbstick. You can see it snaps back to that point 00002 perfectly, and on the other controller as well. That is really impressive. It's also a very sensitive controller, so even just the slightest bit of movement does start to show some input on there, which is pretty impressive. Like I said, I've had no issues getting the other buttons to register on here. Everything pops through just as it should. Pretty impressive with that. And then testing the circularity down here, you can get an average error. So there you can see what that average error looks like. And that was significantly lower, I think maybe around 8 or 9% on the Thrustmaster eSwap. But here are the numbers that we're getting for this controller, the PowerA Fusion Pro 3. My only complaint with the sticks is that the little friction rings around the outside of the thumbstick here, these actually have kind of the most friction that I've noticed in Xbox controllers recently. Like if you're pushing hard in one direction and making some small micro movements, you can actually feel that and feel it kind of a little bit of friction, a little bit of resistance on there, which is something that you don't feel at all when using like the Thrustmaster eSwap S. Something like the eSwap, this is the eSwap S from Thrustmaster. This has a silky smooth, this actually feels like frictionless movement when you are kind of at the extremities of what the thumbstick can do. The stock controller, you can feel it a little bit more, but it's not that bad. This one, in certain scenarios, you could actually feel a pretty decent amount of resistance when I was using the thumbstick. Now, I really only noticed this when playing an FPS game like Battlefield 2042, where I was, just kind of moving around and kind of pinning that thumbstick in one direction, probably pushing a little bit hard. On the other side of that, when playing like Forza Horizon 5 and using thumbstick, I never really noticed that issue. So it kind of depends on what types of games you're playing, if that might be an issue, but once again, for that $80 price point, you kind of would hope to see some better friction rings in there that feel a little bit better. And we kind of already mentioned this, but the thumbsticks are swappable. So you take that faceplate off, and then you can just pop the thumbsticks off, and there are two different heights that are included. The stock height looks very similar to what the stock Xbox controller is, and then the taller thumbsticks do seem to about double the height. So it gets a little bit higher there for those who want a little bit more precision. There are two different taller thumbsticks, and they both have a little bit of a different design. One is the same kind of concave shape that we see on the shorter sticks, which is similar to the stock controller, and the other one is a domed design, but also has a little bit more texture on it for a little bit more grip. Personally, I found myself using the concave, more stock-like stick option, as this is what I was most familiar with. So that's a rundown of all the specs and features and all the hardware on here. Now, just to comment a little bit on the overall feel of the controller. It is $80, which is kind of pushing the limit of what I would call a budget controller, and it has some great features for that. Like I said, I love the back buttons on here. I think they're perfectly placed. I think they're just the right amount of resistance to actuate. I find these very usable. But there are some other things that kind of detract from that overall experience. I mean, the bumpers aren't really that great. Here you kind of hear what those sound like. They're okay, but it's definitely very plasticky, not a very satisfying feel on there. And to reiterate, the friction that you feel in the thumbsticks is definitely a bummer to see at this price point. And we didn't touch on it, but the D-pad is pretty mushy, just kind of a lackluster experience over here too. It's just a 4-way D-pad. Which is something to consider, depending on what types of games you play. You might want something that's a little bit better for getting, some more precise direction on there. So hopefully going through that list, you can see if the features that this has are something that you're actually looking for. Are you looking for really good back buttons in the perfect place? Is that something you want to use a lot? This controller nails it. If you're looking for adjustable triggers, if you're looking for, adjustable height of thumbsticks, those are other great things that this controller has. But if you just want something that feels like a premium quality controller, you might want to aim for something a little bit different. These eSwap S controllers are really incredible. They're a little bit more expensive than this is, but you get a lot of great functionality built into this. And, you can remove the thumbsticks and replace them if those ever cause any issues. So some really cool features in this controller. Check out our review up here. So for $80, I do think that the PowerA Fusion Pro 3 is a good solid controller if you're looking for those features. Otherwise, you might want to look for something else. But that's going to do it for this review of the PowerA Fusion Pro 3. Let us know what you think about it down in the comments below. And if you're looking for some other videos to watch, I'll link to our review of the eSwap XR with the racing module, as well as our most recent video. And thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up so others can find it easier, and consider subscribing. This is Jordan with 9to5 Toys.